What drives a human being to play the game of life? And how should one choose to play it? I've come to find that there are as many answers to that question as there are people on this planet. But all of those unique answers share one central truth. It all comes down to you. And no matter who you are, the motivating force behind your actions either comes from love or it comes from fear. As with all things, there is something that lives between them, but we'll get there. For now, let's explore the ground we've covered more deeply. Fear is defined as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. In other words, aversion. Whatever the it is, you want to get away from it. You want to avoid it, alleviate it, to make it disappear. Love, on the other hand, is defined as an intense feeling of deep affection, a great interest and pleasure in something. In other words, deep attraction. Whatever the it is, you want to get as close as you can to it. You want as much of it as possible. You want to enhance it to make it last. And yet, from the outside, whether someone is motivated by fear or by love, the motivated individual will show up with nearly identical intensity, passion even. One by disdain, the other desire. Both somehow light the proverbial fire in our human engines. But which one is better? Well, that depends. Sometimes it's fear that burns brighter than love ever could. Other times it's love that consumes fear like the sun to a lesser star, merging permanently with the greater force, consumed in its unrivaled luminosity and heat. Of the two, which fuel source most sustains your life? Which one would you prefer? What's in the way? I'd love to explore that with you in the comments if you're down. Until then, I'll lead the way. For me, as of now in the beginning of spring of 2026, I can confidently say that my inner fire's fuel source is organic, boundless, paradigm-shattering, terrifying, all-consuming love. But it wasn't always this way. In fact, most of my life it's been the exact opposite. So how'd I get all the way over here from over there? Well, that's a pretty fucking wild story. But I can't imagine you'd still be here if that was off the table, so I'll share a piece with you. As you may or may not already know, I've always had a rather vivid imagination. Disturbingly so, and from a very young age. So let's start there. I'd say I was 7. I was raised with Christian values and ideology, which meant by 7 I had been assured multiple times a week that a realm of undying fire and suffering was waiting for most of us after death. After death. The very same death that was more than enough to send me into a spiral of terror at the mere mention of it. Let alone that it too was waiting at the end of whatever life actually is. Suffice to say, I had a lot on my 7-year-old mind. I was told many times by my parents to just be a kid. It often followed some dark train of thought I'd been riding for most of the day, and one of them would be waiting for me at the next stop. My dad would show up with the Bible and use his encyclopedic knowledge of it to soothe me with some of the book's most hopeful and reassuring verses, being absolutely sure to skip the other ones. He found a way to fill me with the strength to overcome my existential dread whenever I needed it, and I thank him for that. My mom would embrace me the way only a mother can, and speak from her personal experience to relate and relay the wisdom I needed to overcome the moment. I'll never forget the way she assured me during one of my death spirals. She said, "You'll be ready to die when it's time to, baby." I thank her for that. They both basically raised themselves and worked insanely hard to give myself and my siblings a better shot at a good life than they had. They were two insanely motivated individuals, and it was clear that their inner fire was fueled by love, whereas my inner fire was fueled by unending terror and dread. But what choice did I have but to continue? Despite that, I was shown what true love looks like, what it feels like. My parents surrendered to that love and allowed it to be the fuel source for all that they endeavored to do. I thank them for that. That very same love would open them up deeper and deeper with each passing year until it was clear that they were headed in very different directions. They'd be divorced 3 years later. So here I was, at 10 years old, with an annoying habit of regularly slipping into existential agony, and that pesky divorce, after 25 years of marriage, did a number on their capacity for that shit. Who'd have thought? From that day forward, I'd gradually see my authority figures develop into living, breathing, dynamic human beings. I saw both of them vividly alive, searching, experimenting, hurting, and changing in ways that mirrored my own rapid prepubescent development. Over the next 10 years, I would see my parents as people for the first time, in their deepest, darkest agonies, in their confusion. And it was in this darkness that I was forced to confront forms of pain that I didn't even have the capacity to conceptualize. But I felt it deeply, terribly deeply. I would grow to internalize that felt darkness and desperately cling to the bits and pieces of approval from both parents over the course of their divorce and the ensuing fallout. I was unyieldingly obedient and trusting of them both. After all, they were my parents. But I was completely unaware that they were quickly becoming fierce enemies of each other. I just wanted to be a good kid. I just wanted them to suffer less. I'd listen and comfort them when I could, and with time, I grew closer to them both, despite the rapidly growing distance and disdain between them. I assumed this was a natural consequence of being a good, trustworthy, and empathetic kid. But I'd come to find that it was actually because I was the perfect pawn. So perfect, in fact, that I ended up unwittingly serving my father divorce papers. I was instructed by the other parent not to look inside of a manila folder and to hand it to my father when he picked my sister and I up from school. I'll never forget the way he looked at me when I handed him the folder. I didn't understand. I was just following instructions. He paused a while and said, "Son, you just served me divorce papers." As if I could understand that shit. I'm 10, bitch. I couldn't possibly understand the amount of pain he was in as he said those words to me. But I felt it. From that point on, in his eyes, I was a spy for my mother who'd stabbed him in the back. Not a child dutifully listening to his mother, who was fucking 10, by the way. The years that followed would be a slow and painful descent into resentment and paranoia on both sides. It got so bad that I'd face a brutal interrogation at both of their houses upon arrival. I'd be punished severely for continuing to be that obedient, trusting child in their war of attrition. And as I was gradually used up like a precious resource, so too did their trust in me. I just wanted to be a good son, but over time, I couldn't even be a good pawn. I was useless. I'd suffer in ways that would take years to unpack through middle and high school. The interrogations got worse at both houses until one day I arrived at my father's house and my sister wasn't there. I was coming home from a track meet that he was supposed to be at. He got held up at a police station. They surrounded his car on accusation of abuse. False charges as far as I know. And it was just a way for my sister to stay with my mom full time. Unfortunately, it was also a well-placed ballistic missile for a 6'4" black man living in an upper middle class neighborhood that didn't want us there anyway. And everything changed after that. I still didn't have the capacity to understand how much, but I would feel it. The pain and fear of that experience drove my father into what I can only describe as madness, and I would inherit it too. I developed a horrifying religious obsessive compulsive disorder that would stay with me for the next 10 years, but that's for another video. My father and I simultaneously grew closer and farther apart in that madness than either of us would fully realize for quite some time. At this point, I was roughly 17, and I still spent half of the month with my mother. The interrogations grew violent. The only place I could find peace was through online gaming. It was the only place I was free to define myself. I was free to express myself, and the goals were clear. The quests were clear. There were no long-standing, complex grievances that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with me at the same time. There was only the quest before me. There was only the power that awaited on the other side if I was successful. I even made some friends during those years that I still have the honor of calling my brothers to this very day. And the time with them was time away from the hell I called home. Eventually, it was time to graduate. And by then, my father all but hated me. I remember sharing my SAT scores with him and him saying, "I did that. That's because of me." And I'll never forget the frequency with which he'd remind me, when you're 18, you're out. He wanted to be sure I knew he wouldn't be there after his legal obligations were complete. Which brings us back to the madness. I watched his resentment for me and the rest of my family, hell, even the world, grow before my very eyes. The deeper he sank into religious texts, the more paranoid he grew. And it wasn't all religion's fault. It was the result of unresolved, unacknowledged childhood trauma, justified trust issues, and a deeply flawed and failed economy. Don't even get me started on all the systemic shit. By now, he'd remarried, and she had already begun cutting off the rest of her family, her kids included. I watched as he prepared to do the same to me the moment I turned 18. Why the fuck was I still going over there? And if he was anything, he was a man of his word. I prepared to leave for college, and I could feel his resentment bubbling over. I wasn't in enough pain. I didn't need him enough. I was just gonna disappear and seek happiness. His battered and bruised pawn was leaving his kingdom and dared to have his head held high. He stayed just close enough to be out of reach. He needed to see me fail. So we engineered the circumstances to make it so. But I didn't. I learned to shave by myself and got my first jobs on my own. When I landed a particularly good one, he said, "I'm sure you're feeling very prideful. You're gonna fall on your face one day." I enrolled into my classes with only the money from my last paycheck and did my best to keep up with them and a full-time job out of necessity. That didn't go well. My mother had her hands full with my siblings, so with nowhere else to turn, I reluctantly called him. I could hear the vindication and joy in his voice. It'd been about 6 months. He offered to take me back in and pay for all my classes. I was shocked, but I knew at this point that this was just a chance for him to gloat. It wasn't enough to hear me express my failure to survive with no support system or guidance. He wanted to see it. So he decided he wanted to celebrate my birthday suddenly. He bought me a shirt that was a size too small and interrogated me, like always, over dinner. He smugly brought up his offer like a negotiation between businesses, a potential outcome contingent upon some sort of offer from me. So I responded in kind. I'll think about it. He knew I didn't have any other options, but I wasn't about to depend on the man who'd abused and manipulated me for as long as I could remember. I'd take any other source of pain than that one. That's when my real support network reached out. One of my closest friends at the time offered me his bedroom while he was away for the summer. I gladly accepted. My father took that personally. I had ruined his chance to hold every ounce of his resentment toward me and my dependence on the resources and support he'd withheld over my head. He took it so personally that he silently cut me off. I decided to visit him to confirm. Two can play at that game, bitch. His last words to me were, "I see your moves." That's when it all became clear. Tears flooded my eyes, blurring his figure into an amorphous shadow. It was a real-time representation of the most he'd ever be from this point forward. It dawned on me then that my journey with him for the last decade was a calculated chess match. He was perpetually at war with my mother, with me, and chiefly with himself, and he felt he'd lost. I was never going to convince him otherwise. I and the rest of my family were effectively dead to him, and though I couldn't possibly know it then, I felt it. I gasped a goodbye before I walked away from his door for the last time, returning to the free fall that was my life. I cried because I knew he was dead to me too. I knew nothing could have changed this ending. This was all it would ever be. So, what the fuck does this have to do with our topic? I don't even know for real. I lost the plot, man. This shit heavy. I'm just playing. I bring up this very painful part of my formative years because the very same man that couldn't see beyond his pain or love me as his child anymore was also a significant catalyst for my evolution from boyhood to manhood. After that painful departure from decades of trauma, the driving force within me was finally changing. I was alone, but I was free. It was like waking up from a years-long nightmare. I actually had the space to be a human being, not a pawn. I could define myself rather than suffering between the constraints of what was cast upon me. I could finally live. Finally walking away from that smug, judgmental, insecure, passive-aggressive douche cannon that was my father around 2016 was a rite of passage. My manhood took the form of being able to fully confront the devastatingly ugly truths of my upbringing, of the world at large, of myself as a human being and a participant on the world stage. In a paradoxical way, his absence and cold resentment toward me forced me to snap out of blind obedience to him. All those years of abuse and manipulation showed me experientially that there was no reward for blind faith. It toughened me the fuck up. I wouldn't wish any of the things either of my parents did in their tremendous pain on anyone. But were it not for some of the truly awful ways I was treated, I might never have stopped seeking approval in place of my own autonomy. I might never have gotten to a place where I could actually forgive my parents. I might never have been able to see that they were just doing the best they could. I was only able to even do that because of what I learned in that felt darkness we shared. That pain I saw in their eyes so often during the worst years of their war. I got to know that pain so intimately that I was able to recognize it as separate from them. An entity with its own body, its own will. I could see that they were blinded, consumed, and manipulated just as I was. My father was a good man, in more pain than he knew what to do with. He did his best. And the same goes for my mother. She took on what he left behind and remains a pillar of love and strength for myself and my siblings. Now let's be clear. This process of analysis took a long fucking time. I had every right to crash the fuck out, and there were times where I did. But that brings us back to motivation within a person, the fuel source that drives them. If you take nothing from this, let it be this. Pain is inevitable. You will experience it, and you will inflict it on other conscious living beings intentionally and unintentionally. It is a fact of life, no matter what you intend to do. It's like taking a shit. The rudest, most insufferable person must still go somewhere somewhat private, assume the position, and drop fragrant logs out of their backsides into toilet water or a hole. Then they absolutely must wipe their assholes clean with whatever's available, and in most cases, still not get it all. Just like that overly detailed example, pain is also a fact of life. To try to somehow avoid all that pain is like trying to breathe underwater. You're welcome to do it, but it is objectively counterintuitive considering what we are, which is a helplessly vulnerable, sensitive, sentient mystery. Despite that inspiring description, there is something I can only describe as transcendent that we, as human beings, are capable of with the pain we experience over the course of our lives. We can give it meaning through a process that I call transmutation. I obviously didn't coin the term, but I use it in a context that the alchemists and hermetic scholars of the past probably wouldn't. Transmutation, to me, is the process by which we harness and refine the abundant and deeply painful energy of life experience into something that fundamentally changes our relationship to it and to other conscious beings. That something is capacity. These deeply painful experiences that we all come to have one way or another, just by virtue of being conscious, are no longer simply nails to a cross you must bear until your last breath. No. Through transmutation, these nails melt in the heat of the awareness of your consciousness, returning what was once a fixed source of trauma into energy that you can shape into keys to the doors of your inner sanctum. The pain expands you experientially by virtue of your having survived. It's easy to assume that this enhanced capacity is only for pain. On the contrary, this capacity is in the realm of understanding too. It's in the realm of love. It's in the realm of intelligence. It's in the realm of your connection to the world as a whole. Each key of experience is an invitation to more, to a longer and more intimate dance with the forces of nature on the world stage. The song of life develops alongside your capacity for it, and with each new key you discover, with each newly opened door, you step deeper into a power with no limitations. I could have easily become my father in my hate for how he treated me, but I've instead allowed it to expand my understanding of trauma as a whole. Through transmutation, you transition gradually from a spectator to a co-creator. This spectacular process allows me to take the pain of my past and transmute it into something tangible and useful in the present. As life tattoos your expanding heart with her unmistakable signature, your capacity for life force as a whole expands in kind if you allow it to. Which leads me to what I believe to be the purpose of the dark suffering that has shaped the essence of my life journey. Through transmutation, my mental, emotional, and spiritual wounds become sacred spaces within which I may know myself and others more deeply. They become gateways to a shared experience with all conscious beings, wherein true collective healing is possible. The space that you and I reside in right now is one such gateway. I've taken you with me into one of my deepest wounds, a terribly dark place. But have we been consumed in its depths? Or are we in a lighter space now? And if so, how did we get light from darkness? It would seem to me that perhaps light and darkness aren't actually opposites, but two pieces of the same whole. All we had to do was recognize that. But that's just me. What about you? You know what to do. Thanks for being here. I hope you got something helpful from this. I'll see you again soon, traveler.